Good afternoon and welcome to the 6th Annual Platinum Group Metals Roundtable, hosted by the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, or MISTRA, in partnership with Creamer Media's Contract Publishing. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media's Contract Publishing. This year's roundtable explores possible opportunities within the PGM sector that can contribute to a resilient and inclusive post-pandemic economy. The objective of the 2021 PGM Roundtable is to look closely at PGM beneficiation as a catalyst for economic recovery and reconstruction strategies, its value in climate change mitigation, as well as the role of the hydrogen roadmap in the PGM sector. Before we begin, please note that the Q&A function has been enabled, so please post all your questions into the Q&A box, which you'll find on the panel at the bottom of your screen. You can also interact with the panelists and other attendees in the chat box. Please also be aware that we are recording the webinar and we'll be sending you a copy of the recording afterwards. We're also streaming the webinar live to YouTube. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce Zama Mazibuku Makena, MISTRA's Senior Researcher for Knowledge Economy and Scientific Advancement, who will facilitate the webinar. It's over to you, Zama.
Thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon to all our esteemed guests. Thank you for joining us this afternoon and welcome to the 6th segment of MISTRA's annual PGM Roundtable. We trust this afternoon's session, just like previous sessions, will have discussions that will move the PGM industry forward. We trust that it will be fruitful for everyone who has joined us this afternoon and that you'll have takeaways. I'd like to welcome MISTRA's Executive Director, Mr. Joel Nechitenze, to provide us with the welcome remarks.
Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to all colleagues, and special thanks to Creamer Media for again partnering us in this annual MISTRA Roundtable on platinum group metals and the hydrogen economy. Each year now, the focus of discussion is moving more and more towards practical actions for our country to become an active part of the global hydrogen economy. It is therefore appropriate that the focus today is on the role of PGMs in the reconstruction and recovery plan. Activities in the hydrogen economic space are now part of current and not futuristic industrial and trade policy. Government has identified green hydrogen as the first among South Africa's big frontiers of strategic investment. In this context, we need to ensure that we pursue a holistic approach with key elements that include, firstly, production of hydrogen and PGM as raw materials for the global hydrogen economy. Secondly, utilization of hydrogen as an energy source within South Africa itself. Thirdly, manufacturing of electrolyzers for the production of green hydrogen and manufacturing of fuel cells. And lastly, financial beneficiation in the form of a PGM exchange. In other words, as we pursue new and exciting initiatives, we should not lose sight of any of the elements of the hydrogen economy. Otherwise, we will end up as producers and exporters of raw materials with minimal manufacturing input, thus perpetuating the relationship of dependence and subordination with countries of the North. I suppose we would all agree that in the past 18 months, we have seen epoch-making advances in the emergence of the hydrogen economy. For those of us who are fanatics of sport, we would have enjoyed the recent Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. But more than just sport, some of us may have noticed that Japan sought to use the Games as what they called the Hydrogen Olympics. The torch was fueled largely by hydrogen. Many buses and cars in the Games were propelled by fuel cells, and electricity in sections of the athletes' village was also generated by fuel cells. All this as part of Japan's strategy to introduce some 100,000 fuel cell cars in Tokyo by 2025, and to scale up this technology in electricity generation. The momentum is also picking up speed, including in Europe and North America. And MISTRA's approach from the time we released the publication on PGMs and the global hydrogen economy in 2013 to the recent booklet on a PGM exchange is that given our endowments in this area, South Africa can become a leading actor with many first mover advantages. We therefore welcome the initiation of the Hydrogen Mobility Corridor by Sasol and Toyota, the initiative to develop aviation fuel, progress on the PGM SEZs, advances in work by Amplats and other mining companies on fuel cell trucks and electricity generation, and the decisive entry of Black-owned companies such as Isondo, Bambili, and Mitochondria into fuel cell manufacturing. In this regard, unlike in other sectors which are established, we have the possibility here to build empowered companies that have the potential to become strategic national champions. Given the strategic position that we occupy as a country in this value chain of the global hydrogen economy, from mining and hydrogen production to fuel cell and electrolyzer manufacturing, we have a profound responsibility to ensure global security of supply. This implies a variety of conditions, including a conducive environment for investment in mining, stakeholder relations where mining and other operations are located, and proactive development of relevant skills across the hydrogen economy value chain. In addition to all this, a question that can no longer be postponed is whether we are in fact doing enough to develop the necessary demand side elements of the equation within South Africa itself. Beyond the examples we cited earlier, what about initiatives, for instance, to use fuel cells in state buildings, starting off with a backup generation, transport fleets in state-owned enterprises, microgrids in electricity generation in rural areas, and so on. In my view, these are some of the issues that we need to address as we enter in earnest the phase of practical implementation. Many opportunities beckon. The question is whether we are prepared to seize them with both hands. Thank you very much, and you are all welcome.
Thank you, Edie. It's indeed exciting to see the hydrogen economy taking shape in other parts of the world, and indeed seeing some movement here at home. It gives us hope that there's indeed a light at the end of this hydrogen economy tunnel and of course the PGM industry. Next, we have Dr. Nobile Kaba, who is a researcher at MISTRA in the Knowledge Economy and Scientific Advancement faculty. She will take us through the overview of MISTRA's work on the PGM sector over the years. Thank you, Nobile.
Thank you, Uzama. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And today I will be presenting the PGM Roundtable summary containing all the work that MISTRA has done throughout these engagements over the years. MISTRA, through its research, identified that although there were developments in the PGM sector, excuse me, let me just yes, do a slide share. MISTRA, through its research, identified that although there were developments in the PGM industry, there was limited collaboration and strained communication between the stakeholders. In this regard, MISTRA convened multiple actors to take stock of the developments in the sector and to anticipate and assess emerging themes within the developments with the purpose of drawing to the need for PGM beneficiation in South Africa. The Roundtable has become an annual event and a neutral platform for stakeholders to report back and seek collaboration. An overview of the focus, discussions, and leading themes and resolutions of the PGM Annual Roundtable from 2016 to 2020 is recounted. As you can see, this is the current PGM Roundtable roadmap from its inception in 2016 up until 2020. The first PGM Roundtable was held in 2016. The primary question for the Roundtable was how South Africa could beneficiate the country's large endowment of PGMs. The meeting resolved that a triple helix approach was imperative in moving towards PGM beneficiation. The triple helix refers to the notion of the three pillars of government, business, and research working collaboratively. The work done by the Hydrogen South Africa, which is HYSA, was noted and was critical. Their research outputs had increased the knowledge economy of the PGM sector. There was also a consensus on the increase of investment into building a knowledge economy for increasing market development. There was also agreement that the market development should encompass the development of small business innovation and new technologies. Some of the recommendations and the outcomes are summarized in the slide and include the fact that South Africa's PGM industry needs to invest in the building of a credible knowledge economy, and that market development must go hand in hand with small business innovations and new technologies. And also that SMMEs must be nurtured by government. The second PGM Roundtable was held in 2017. The meeting looked specifically at the political economy in the PGM sector. The main questions were, will the political economy allow for industrialization, and what is next with the PGM industry? And where are the institutional gaps in the PGM value chain, and how can they be filled? What devices are needed to take South Africa towards a higher PGM beneficiation? The threads of the triple helix were not yet aligned, and the primary cause was the private sector was in financially dire state, yet the government strand needed investment, both into research demand and development. This contestation between the stakeholders was attributed to the inequitable distribution of benefits from the mining industry. Therefore, more investment into market development was identified as being essential for international competition. And some of the recommendations that were brought forward include that the HISA program was making encouraging progress, and that local fuel cell technology, like the catalyst industry, can attain maturity by creating global partnerships, and that the creation of Black industrialists is important for South Africa. Also, that captive markets for hydrogen fuel cells must be identified as means to create demand, and more research needs to occur in order to fill and dominate this niche space. The third PGM Roundtable was held in 2018. The meeting had a policy and industrial focus. The question of what needs to be done next, by whom and when and how was asked. The participants agreed that fuel cell technology should form part of the integrated resource plan. It was also recommended that the value chain components must be unpacked further. A case for more fuel cell deployment was made and assessed. However, the success of PGM beneficiation will rely heavily on public-private partnerships, and some have been commendable. Other recommendations include the fact that the major limitation for the fuel cell vehicles is the refueling technology, and that HISA Systems has begun a cost-benefit strategy to lower the cost of this technology. It was also recommended that the first trials for electric vehicles be on long-distance large vehicles, for instance, trucks, buses, and trains. And this is because there are more constraints around charging time if hydrogen, for hydrogen as a fuel. There was also concerns about the need for monetary resources, and that the high cost of the technology do prove to be a challenge for rural electrification. The fourth PGM Roundtable was held in 2019, and it interrogated the policy requirements and the existing landscape for PGM beneficiation. The 2019 Roundtable aimed to answer the question of how far have we come towards the PGM beneficiation. The hydrogen economy was picking up at a global momentum, and the onus was on South African PGM sector to take up either a leadership role in the hydrogen economy or be followers. Practical steps towards PGM beneficiation had to be taken. New global partnerships were needed to be formed in order to realize PGM beneficiation. The research on the feasibility of a PGM exchange in South Africa was presented for the first time. One of the key benefits that the PGM exchange will offer is opening a currently narrowed value chain. In turn, a longer and broader PGM value chain will unlock the multiplier effect in the broader economy. Some of the other recommendations were that the PGM sector must move to a more practical trajectory, and that financial investments are still required for a successful and a large-scale fuel cell technology development. It was also noted that the HISA program is entering its third phase of commercialization, and that the PGM industry must seek alliance to the climate change response policies of the country, and that the PGM debate should be anchored in the need for the response to climate change and potential for financial beneficiation. The fifth PGM Roundtable was convened in 2020. The focus was on building a social compact for a PGM industry. The discussion was based on participants' attitudes towards and responses to the idea of building a social compact for South Africa's PGM industry, and also how the automotive industry can also be used as a tool for PGM beneficiation. The Hydrogen Society Roadmap was presented and introduced by the Department of Science and Innovation. Responses from various sectors, including business, labor, and government, reach a consensus that there must be an increase in disclosure and transparency. Some of the key recommendations of this roundtable were: the local fuel cell research spearheaded by the Hydrogen South Africa and the Department of Science and Technology is continuing to grow. There are more and core applications of the technologies in niche markets, and the results are encouraging. The market development and commercialization strategies should continue. The Hydrogen Society Roadmap has been formed by the DSI with the aim to integrate hydrogen-related technologies in different sectors of the economy and of society. The aim is to foster inclusive growth and help reduce poverty and inequality. The purpose of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap is to align stakeholders around common vision on hydrogen-related technologies for South Africa. There is support for building a social compact for the PGM industry in principle by stakeholders. There is a call for more clarity on what is meant by social compact. This will result in a more transparent approach towards PGM beneficiation. However, the how may require more creativity. The social compact is supported for the key reasons that the management of the country's resources should not be managed by private sector alone. Building the compact will alleviate the past transgressions of the PGM sector. Transparency is required from all the stakeholders, especially the side of business. An area that often hinders coherency between stakeholders is the lack of transparency. Participants advocated for openness and disclosure that is required from the side of business. A long-term strategy is required for the beneficiation of minerals in South Africa. The resources should sustain the country even after the minerals are depleted and production has stopped. This can only be a reality if the beneficiation and social compact is successful. There are key themes that have been prevalent throughout the roundtables, and their progress have been tracked through these gatherings. The information and strategies brought to the PGM roundtables have enabled stakeholders to lobby for policy changes in their respective sectors. There have been goals that have been achieved and some learning milestones, and these include the following: the transformation of the South African energy sector using the hydrogen economy. South Africa has a large endowment of PGM. The development of sustainable fuel cell technology has been a key attribution to the diversification of the Integrated Resource Plan of 2019. The HISA project is in its commercialization phase. A MISTRA publication titled South Africa and the Global Hydrogen Economy, the Strategic Role of Platinum Group Metals, highlighted the HISA initiative, and the PGM roundtables have been a tool to assess HISA's progress. The project has gone from research to piloting technologies and now forming part of initiatives in schools, primary health service, the post office network, and mining sites. MISTRA, in partnership with the Johannesburg Exchange Limited and Pan-African Investments and Research Services, has launched a research report on the desirability and practicability of setting up a PGM exchange in South Africa. They concluded that the PGM exchange be established in South Africa for financial beneficiation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mobile. MISTRA has indeed, over the years, tried to bring stakeholders together to have these conversations that have just slowly but surely moved the PGM industry and the hydrogen economy sector forward. And one of the things that have come up time and again in these conversations is that there is a need for a central coordinator of the work that is happening in this industry, so that everyone involved knows what's happening, when it's happening, and who's doing what. I think over the years, slowly, there's more understanding of what's happening in the PGM industry, but of course, more can be done. So that central coordinator is something that is required so that we know where we are as a country. Now we're going to just move to the discussion session. So if anyone has any questions, please type in your questions in the chat. I don't see any questions thus far, but if anyone has anything to ask about the progress of the PGM Roundtable thus far and the findings that have surfaced in the past couple of years during these roundtables, please do type in your questions in the chat, and we'll get the Executive Director, Dr. Mapungubwe Institute, to answer those questions. I see there's a question about where one can get the publication. The publication is on our website. You can contact our publications coordinator, Terry. We'll just ask Anita to please type in the details in the chat for where people can get the hydrogen books, all the publications that MISTRA has released over the past couple of years. I see if you go into the chat, you'll see that there's information that has been posted about where to get MISTRA's publications on the hydrogen economy and PGM industry. I see there's a question also in the chat, which is, what is South Africa's go-to policy document on hydrogen? I don't know if Dr. Mapungubwe Institute would like to take that. If you'd like to answer that on a policy document, the go-to policy document on hydrogen.
Hi. So in terms of the policy document, there are various documents that are quite available that have been compiled by different institutions in South Africa, and that includes the work that was done by the CSIR and then the IHS market report on hydrogen. But we were just discussing with the Dr. Chimete from the DSI, the Hydrogen Society roadmap is going to come out before the end of the year, and I think that is going to be a useful document to look forward to.
Yes, thank you for that. The hydrogen roadmap definitely will become, it's anticipated to become one of those very important documents that we can all refer to when we'd like to see what is happening in the hydrogen economy in the country. So we all are waiting that document with great anticipation. And there's another question which says, from a government policy standpoint and funding towards hydrogen sector development, could you please provide us insight into where you think we should be? If the ED could also chip in if he knows how to answer that question, or anyone else in the panel who would have insight into government policy standpoints and funding towards hydrogen sector development and what they think or where they think we should be in the hydrogen economy as a country.
Thank you, Zama. I will not go into detail in responding to this question. I do suppose the presentation by Dr. Chitemechu should help clarify those issues. But as the presentations have indicated, there is much work that is being done in HISA, which is led by the Department of Science and Technology, or Science and Innovation. And it is coordinating all the work that is being done by government. It is also leading the process of developing the hydrogen roadmap in coordination, by the way, with the countries in Southern Africa. And so there are resources that have been allocated to HISA, and the capacity has now been attained to manufacture not only components, but also full fuel cells. During the course of last year, some of us might be aware that one of the field hospitals in Tshwane to deal with the challenge of COVID-19 was in fact powered by Bambili Energy, which used fuel cells. So there is research, there are processes to take necessary policy decisions. There is funding to start initiating manufacturing. SEZs are being established with the necessary tax incentives. And so overall, one can say the strategy is moving to the phase of implementation. But Dr. Chiteme, I suppose, will elaborate on this. There was also a question about electric vehicles and how far South Africa is in this regard. I'm not aware of the detail of the matter, but broadly what one can indicate is that the new industrial motor vehicle manufacturing plan is seeking to incorporate the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Already a number of companies have indicated that they will do so in South Africa, and some have started manufacturing hybrid vehicles. But if we were to come to the area of fuel cell technology, there is nothing much that is happening in that regard, except that work is continuing to ensure that there is coordination amongst, firstly, those who have got the capacity to produce and distribute hydrogen, and secondly, companies like Toyota that are already producing fuel cell vehicles. The hydrogen mobility corridor that we referred to is part of that partnership between Gauteng and eThekwini or Durban. That's where that hydrogen mobility corridor is to be established, with Sasol providing the hydrogen and Toyota providing the fuel cell vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Edie. There's a comment in the chat, and it speaks to Mintech and the Department of Science and Innovation, who are currently preparing a South African PGM industry roadmap. This comment is by Hein Moller, and he says it is funded by the DSI through the Advanced Materials Initiative's Precious Metals Development Network. This roadmap is broader than the Hydrogen Society roadmap. Inputs from stakeholders across the full value chain, which is mining, beneficiation, downstream products, are encouraged. The objective is to develop a roadmap to guide future innovation in the use of PGMs, not limited to hydrogen only. That would be interesting actually to get hold of and see the progress there. If there are any more questions, please do type them in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. I think that will be easier for panelists to also answer and type answers to those questions that you pose in the Q&A box.
I've seen, Zama, there is a question about our competitors, our biggest competitors in both PGM and hydrogen economies. I would argue that the approach that I understand the South African government has adopted, and this would similarly be the approach of MISTRA, is that yes, we need to assess whether there are competitors. There might be some who may not be happy that South Africa is considering establishing a PGM exchange, but our approach is to consider partnerships. That this technology is nascent, it needs to be developed. We have to create market demand globally and within South Africa itself. And so the question that we pose to ourselves is, how can we partner with others in developing the hydrogen economy? With regard to PGMs, for instance, we have sought to interact with both Zimbabwe and Russia, who are producers of some of the PGM minerals. And insofar as hydrogen is concerned, particularly green hydrogen, we see Europe, Germany, which has already interacted with us. We see Japan and many other countries as markets for the green hydrogen that South Africa can produce. Thanks.
Thank you. There are other questions in the Q&A. A question which is from Padili Hotla, which says, what are the specifics about the outcomes should we be successful in execution of the hydrogen economy? How far would we go on the targets of the NDP? And also in terms of agreement on this important initiative, what are the timelines? Or if not, what should be done to speed up the actions towards the end state?
My sense, Zama, is that a number of the questions might in fact be preempting the presentation by Dr. Chiteme, and maybe we should go to that presentation and we'll then come back to the questions.
All right, thank you, Edie. I will carry on, be a bit early on time, but I will just continue to the next session, which is the panel discussion. On the panel, we do have Dr. Cosmos Chiteme from the Department of Science and Innovation, and who works with Hydrogen South Africa, or HySA, and he will present on the Hydrogen Society Roadmap and where we are headed. He will be followed by Ms. Zanele Mavusombata from Bambili Energy, and she will take us through SMMEs within the PGM value chain. And then lastly, we have Dr. Raphael Karue from the JSE, and he will take us through setting up a metals exchange. So first up is Dr. Cosmos Chiteme. Could you please take us through your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, and good afternoon to all colleagues on the line. It's a pleasure to be participating again in one of the MISTRA roundtables, which has become a very important event as we build towards a hydrogen economy in the country. My presentation is going to provide a bit of updates on the process that we have followed so far in developing the Hydrogen Society roadmap. So in the slide that I have on the screen, I take it you are seeing my slides?
Yes,
Could
we are.
Just confirm before I rattle on.
We can see them. Thanks, Cosmos.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the confirmation. So this slide here is just saying from a natural resource perspective, South Africa is well positioned to participate in the hydrogen economy. Not only as a raw material supplier, but as you will see in some of the initiatives that we are going to outline, as a very significant global player, even within the technology development space. So the Hydrogen Society roadmap or the hydrogen economy gives us an opportunity to basically export our natural resources in the form of hydrogen to other parts of the world and assist in the global efforts to decarbonize. So this slide that I have here outlines the journey that we have followed as a coordinating department that has been tasked by government to develop the RDI scope in terms of research, development, and innovation. So as you can see, the journey has been tortuous, but I think in our own opinion, very structured in how we have gone about it. Innovation by its nature takes time. And we are glad that we have actually stayed the course up to the point where we are. And this is thanks to not only the support from other government departments, but also from other partners like MISTRA, who have been on the journey with us thus far. So if we start at the beginning of the journey, this started in 2007, following cabinet approval of the HISA RDI strategy, or Hydrogen South Africa in full, where we were looking at really developing technologies in the hydrogen and fuel cell technology space, using our PGMs as a resource. So the emphasis there was local beneficiation to extract more value out of the minerals that we have. This was followed by the formal launch of the Hydrogen South Africa program, which is a 15-year RDI program by the Minister of Science and Technology at that time in 2008. Then we then went on to establish the RDI centers in the form of the HISA centers of competence that are hosted by universities and science councils to execute the RDI strategy. So typically what we have done over the years is the program, being a 15-year program, is divided into 3 5-year phases. And at the end of each 5-year cycle, we do what we call an independent review of the program, where we invite international and local experts to look at the progress that has been made and then provide key recommendations in terms of the way forward and how the program would have fared against its intended objectives. So the first review was done in 2014, and then the second one was completed in during the 2019-20 financial year. And I'm focusing on that second year 5-year review, because one of the key recommendations that emanated from that review was the need to develop an overarching framework that would then guide South Africa's hydrogen aspirations. And the importance of that framework would then be able to facilitate the uptake of the technologies that had been developed through the Hydrogen South Africa program, but also recognizing that there were some initiatives that were also happening outside the program. And the Hydrogen Society roadmap was then initiated as a coordinating framework to say, let's leverage on all those initiatives happening across the public and the private sector for us to map the way forward. So we initiated that, the development of the Hydrogen Society roadmap after consulting with key government departments on the need to actually embark on that process. So in earnest, the process started in early 2020, and we are here now where we already have a draft document that was presented to Cabinet on the 8th of September, and we are awaiting formal feedback from that process. But in the interim, we have also had pronouncements after looking at the draft roadmap. Minister Patel from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition mandated the IDC, the Industrial Development Corporation, to start developing a green hydrogen commercialization strategy that would then support the implementation of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. So that's the journey thus far. And we have tried to follow an inclusive process that will then allow stakeholder buy-in, but also to create an environment where investment decisions can be made, particularly from the private sector, who are typically the executors of some of these projects. So, as I mentioned earlier, independent reviews are an integral part of the programs that we run within the DSI, particularly the RDI program, because they provide us with a stage gate approach where we actually assess the progress made and also look at the inputs that we are getting from the experts. So we have done that, and that's the reason why we actually initiated the process of developing the Hydrogen Society roadmap. But this slide goes as far as showing some of the recommendations and what we are currently doing to implement some of those recommendations beyond the roadmap process. For instance, we have now started engagements with the private sector, both domestically as well as internationally. And there are some projects like the one with Japan under the SATREPS, where we are actually collaborating, and that will result in some green ammonia synthesis plant, a pilot plant being established in South Africa. So we are also in the process of formalizing our relationship with SASO and mapping the way forward in terms of how they can actually get involved even in the Hydrogen South Africa program. The Hydrogen Society roadmap is not being developed in isolation. There is a number of policy documents that are either in development or some of them have already been developed, such as the Green Transport Strategy that was developed in 2018, led by the Department of Transport. And that talks to the issues of mobility or green mobility that were being discussed earlier in the call. But also we need to appreciate that these documents are living documents the situation that we had in 2018 is now very different. I think the momentum has increased. So there are aspects that need to be updated even within the green transport strategy. The green hydrogen commercialization strategy, I've already spoken about. The Just Energy Transition Framework is being led by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, so that as we transition towards the hydrogen economy, we do it in a responsible way that do not leave other stakeholders behind, or that do not create other challenges as we start looking at some of our mining towns that have largely been built around the core sector. The Hydrogen South Africa strategy I've spoken about, but there is also a more relevant document that is being developed in the form of the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan that is also being led by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and also involving other stakeholders. This slide here just gives you an idea of the approach that we have taken in developing the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. We have tried to ensure that the process is inclusive across both academia, think tanks, private sector, public sector, and even international organizations in the form of our multinationals. So I think this is a process that we believe has been able to gather sufficient inputs that have informed the Hydrogen Society Roadmap document that we took to Cabinet. In terms of just a snapshot of what is contained in the document, the goal really is looking at a just and inclusive net zero carbon economic growth for societal well-being by 2050. And this responds to the requirements of to the objectives of the National Development Plan. But we have taken cognizance of the fact that as we develop this Hydrogen Society Roadmap, issues of GESI, gender equality and social inclusion are at the core of that transition, as well as continued RDI investments for South Africa to remain globally relevant, but also globally competitive. So in terms of the theory of change informed high-level outcomes of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, we are looking at hydrogen generation, storage, and distribution as a cross-cutter across all the other objectives that have been identified, such as decarbonization of transport sector with a focus on heavy-duty vehicles, shipping, as well as aviation and rail. Decarbonization of energy-intensive industry, particularly those hard-to-abate sectors, which involve steel, chemicals, mining, refineries, and the cement sector. And then thirdly, to really look at the creation of an export market for South African green hydrogen, because this is where we believe that if we can put our house in order and position ourselves to play as a significant exporter of green hydrogen, there will be economic benefits, and certainly we can contribute towards our economic recovery. The manufacturing sector, we believe that local manufacturing and where possible anchored by locally developed IP, of course, with the provision that there is also room for inbound technology that should also position our manufacturing sector to be globally competitive. particularly leveraging on the existing expertise that we have in our motor vehicle sector, as well as other sectors where expertise does exist, even in hydrogen production and distribution. A green and enhanced power sector is also what we envisaged from the implementation of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, as we address issues of energy security with a particular focus on sectors such as buildings, as the ED alluded to earlier, to say, how can we actually use public procurement to push the implementation or to initiate the growth of this sector in South Africa. So in terms of, there are a number of levers of change. In other words, the enablers that would allow us to achieve the objectives of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. And they are color-coded in purple, as well as some of the envisaged outputs. But more importantly, the identification of partners who are going to play a critical role in ensuring that we achieve the objectives of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. Now, if we look at how the document is structured, it has got a number of components. If I start from the left of the screen, there's something that we call the Core CO2 to X Research, Development and Innovation Program, where we are looking at harnessing the flue gas coming out of our coal-fired power stations, as well as coal-fired boilers in other sectors of the economy, for instance, the cement sector, and looking at the components within that flue gas, such as your CO2, your NOx and SOx, and using green hydrogen to combine or to make value-added products, such as fertilizer and sulfuric acid, as well as diesel, 0 ppm diesel, and methanol out of those pollutants. So that sort of paradigm shift allows us to look at, to have a very different view of our coal-fired power stations. And they could actually lead to initiatives that would actually sustain economic activities within our coal mining towns and address issues of a just labor transition as well. So the green economy skills development strategy is looking at how we can actually leverage on the TVET college system to create skills that would then support the implementation of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, particularly with a focus on addressing the high unemployment rates among our TVET graduates, because we believe that as much as within the HISA program, we have developed knowledge workers in the form of masters and PhD holders. When it comes to the implementation side of the roadmap, in particular the deployment of the technologies, we need artisans with the requisite skills. And we believe that the TVET college system offers us a platform to create those necessary skills. There are a number of studies that are underway to inform, for instance, the Platinum Valley project, which is basically South Africa's version of the Global Hydrogen Valley Initiative, which some countries use to deploy hydrogen and fuel cell technologies at scale, particularly within confined geographical areas where infrastructure can be shared, but also commercial viability at scale can be demonstrated. The theory of change I've already spoken to that informed some of those high-level outcomes of the roadmap, as well as the hydrogen, the contribution of the review of the Hydrogen South Africa program in identifying the need to develop that high-level hydrogen society roadmap. To focus a little bit on the skills development, in partnership with private sector, such as Bambili, the University of Pretoria, the EWCITA, SANEDI, and so forth, we have actually initiated the skills training program for the unemployed TVET graduates, where we started with a cohort of 25 TVET graduates in early 2020, going to early 2021. Those students underwent, or their graduates rather, underwent a 6-week training program on the installation, operation and maintenance of the fuel cells, using the fuel cells that we had deployed at one military hospital in Pretoria as a training platform. So going forward, we believe that we have set in motion an initiative that with more public and private sector support can be expanded to include more, to train more of these graduates in this sector. So I think for all those who are interested, please let's discuss. So at the moment, I'm just going to highlight a few catalytic projects that have been identified, even as we are still in the process of getting approval of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. We believe that these catalytic projects are essential in kickstarting the implementation phase of the hydrogen economy or the Hydrogen Society Roadmap. One such initiative is the corridor starting in Kalakwena mine from Anglo-Platts mine in the Limpopo province, going through Gauteng, passing through Pretoria and Johannesburg, all the way down to Durban. And we believe that this corridor offers us the opportunity to actually initiate a mobility program with a focus on heavy duty vehicles, particularly heavy trucks and buses. And we can have infrastructure along that corridor to support that pilot project. I'm sure our colleagues from Anglo and Bambili will be speaking more on this project. But also, I think one of the important thing about this initiative is the leveraging of both resources from both the public and private sector to initiate those kind of projects, and even including partnerships from global partnerships as well. The second catalytic project that I would want to talk to is the Core CO2 to X program, which I introduced earlier. And really here we are looking at implementing this project at a scale of the Eskom power plants. Starting, of course, at pilot stage where we are looking at flow rate, minimal flow rates around 300 normal cubic meters per hour of flue gas, going all the way to the midpoint of 16 to 30,000 normal cubic meters per hour, all the way to the Eskom size plants. And the idea, again, is to demonstrate that really we can derive commercial products, green commercial products for that matter, from the flue gas coming out of our coal-fired power stations. And in the process, we can make sure that environmentally, we are actually preventing pollution, but also deriving economic value out of that project. So this is a project that we believe really allows us to transition in a responsible way using existing assets, and we can actually continue to have commercial activity in some of our regions that have naturally borne the brand of air pollution as a result of our fossil fuel intensive energy mix. So in terms of talking to issues of transformation, we believe that we have addressed in the roadmap issues of gender equality and social inclusion, and demonstrated in the proposed action plan what needs to be done to ensure that those aspects are integrated in the implementation of the Hydrogen Society roadmap. We believe that it's only through that inclusive process that we can realize the economic benefits that we so desire through the implementation of the roadmap. A particular focus will be on women and youth-led businesses. And even as we develop capacity, we will be targeting those women-led and youth-led SMMEs as part of the implementation. One of the things that we have picked up is that partnership are very central to the implementation of the roadmap. And what we have done is we have looked at some of the global initiatives, such as the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking being implemented at the European level, as well as in countries such as Germany, with a specific focus on the National Innovation Program. So again, it was with the intention of drawing some of the lessons that will then inform us as we implement the Hydrogen Society roadmap. And issues of public awareness is something that is really important and will be incorporated in the implementation of the roadmap. So in my last slide, which I have on the screen right now, is just to demonstrate some of the technologies that have been deployed, and more importantly, these technologies contain intellectual property that has been developed through the Hydrogen South Africa program. So thank you very much. I know there are a number of questions that have been raised. I don't think this presentation will answer all of them, and I'll be ready to respond to some of them, time allowing. Thank you again for the opportunity. And we always appreciate the support and the platform that is created through the MISTRA Roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chiteme. I'm sure you've answered some of the questions that people had, but if people have any more questions, please do type them in the Q&A and we'll get to them in the discussion session. Next, we have Ms. Zanele Mavuso-Mbata from Bambili Energy, who'll speak on the SMMEs within the PGM value chain. Please take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present this afternoon, and we really appreciate the invitation by MISTRA to participate in this roundtable. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you. Can I please receive confirmation that you can see the slides?
Confirmed?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So I thought what might be useful this afternoon is really just to talk a bit about our experience and our approach in terms of trying to co-lead the development of the fuel cell industry in South Africa and support the development of the hydrogen economy. So the slide that you see right now, which has now disappeared, is a customer we are talking to who is moving into a new building. They are looking at backup power solutions for the building. And we have an opportunity to retrofit a fuel cell system as part of their backup power solution to the building. And we believe that this is an example of things to come, where we have the opportunity to compete head-on with other technologies in terms of backup power. And this particular customer, part of the benefits that they will enjoy is the fact that there's obviously a reduction of emissions to this particular building. They having less reliance on the grid, and the developer of the building itself has further enhancement in terms of the green rating of the building. With over time, we are hoping that we will be earlier in the cycle in terms of working with developers as they plan developments in order to incorporate our technology, which are the fuel cell systems. And the fuel cell systems, as some of you may know, are very complementary with other renewable technologies. And this brings me to the second case study that I wanted to present to you, where there's a customer that manages a very large portfolio of shopping centers in South Africa. And in one of their buildings, they had put up 1 megawatt of solar power. They were considering complementing that with batteries. We persuaded them to analyze the possibility of using fuel cells. And so we are very advanced in that conversation in terms of the adoption of fuel cells within the building. And therefore, here you see that combination of renewable technologies working in concert, where you would have a combination of solar and of fuel cells working together to provide backup power for this customer. And again, you know, besides the reduction of emissions, there's less dependency on the grid, so it gives them that security of power. And the thing to note in all these case studies is that for customers, the issue of reliability and cost are foremost in their minds. And so it's not an easy process to get this market adoption for a relatively nascent technology in the South African market. But we believe that we're making great headway. And as a startup company, thinking about market adoption and at scale as quickly as possible is very, very important. One of the benefits that we think we bring to our business and to our customers is the whole idea around a circular economy. So the whole idea is that, you know, fuel cell systems, the technology we use uses platinum. So there's immediate platinum beneficiation that's localized in South Africa, which we think is absolutely critical. And we as Bambili are very proud of the fact that the technology that we're using is using South African developed IP. And it's using South African platinum directly. So you have a very clear mind to market connection. And through our systems, in terms of how we design them for our customers, we are able to create an energy solution. And it's not just about the fuel cell, it's about what is best for that particular customer and what combination of technologies make sense for them to have security of power and also to reduce their carbon footprint. Because ultimately part of the upside for them to migrating towards fuel cell systems is the fact that they are able to have carbon credits that they gain, that they can on-sell, for example, and that they reduce their carbon tax. With the introduction of the carbon tax, we see that there's almost like a perfect storm in terms of creating an enabling environment in order to have the adoption of fuel cell systems. So the role of government in enhancing that environment is absolutely critical. So you need a combination of incentives, which everybody talks about, but also you need deterrence in terms of further use of polluting technologies. So the carbon tax is one such instrument that is over time going to be very, very effective in terms of pushing pushing customers towards more and more renewable usage for energy. In our case as well, we are very alive to the issue of unemployment in South Africa. We're very passionate about youth unemployment specifically. And so we are looking to make sure we create as many green jobs as possible. And the sweet spot for us is that because we are a manufacturing company, we have a combination of highly experienced, highly skilled engineers, but in our manufacturing and also in our in the maintenance and operations of the fuel cell systems, there's a fantastic opportunity for unemployed youth, especially coming out of the TVET colleges and University of Technologies. We are very committed to making sure that we localize our supply chain as much as possible. As I mentioned earlier, we are using a combination of South African developed IP, but we also are combining it with international IP and international know-how. So we are importing skills and experience into the South African market. And in terms of the type of systems that we use, they typically last a 20-year cycle. And we're able to also offer our customers to refurbish system, which then gives them a price differential on the system. So then again, you are incentivizing customers to ensure that they use the system to the maximum of its life. We love our fuel cell systems. At the end of life, we want them back because we intend to recycle our fuel cell systems, and we have a target of being able to recycle 90% of the system. So that's what creates the circular economy and also illustrates the mine to market potential around our fuel cell systems. You know, I won't spend too much time on the slide because Dr. Chiteme has spoken to it, but we at Bambili, we are very proud of the work that we've been doing with the South African government. Whenever you are looking to have technology uptake and adoption in a market, the relationship that you have across government is very, very critical. And to work in concert with your competitors, with customers, with the government, and it is in that ecosystem that you actually get the most traction in terms of adoption of a new technology. And for customers to have better confidence in the technology, the deployment of and exposure to the technology is absolutely critical. So we were very proud of the fact that we were selected by the Department of Science and Innovation, who have been working with the Department of Defense, the Department of Mineral Energies and Resources, and the Department of Public Works around these deployments. So there are a total of 15 fuel cell systems that we were asked to deploy around the country. This process happened around when COVID-19 struck in South Africa, and we had a crisis around, you know, the issue of how to combat COVID-19. The Department of Defense put up a field hospital on their premises. And the thing to highlight is the fact that the fuel cell system, so if you look at the top picture on the left, you see some blue boxes. That's where the fuel cell systems are in relation to the field hospital on the right. The fuel cell systems are providing primary power to the field hospital. I can't emphasize this enough because it talks to the confidence around the technology that, you know, obviously in this particular field hospital, you know, it's critical care, it's high care, ICU wards are part of the field hospital, and the primary power is being driven by fuel cell systems, and the grid is backup power, and that speaks to the reliability factor of fuel cell systems. For our customers, we're able to guarantee a 99.8% uptime, and therefore, you know, in the where you require critical power on a continuous use basis, that is the absolute sweet spot for fuel cell systems. So this is a very impactful demonstration, and we have found that customers have taken to this particular demonstration to really understand the value of adopting fuel cell systems. The Department of Defense have been very pleased with this deployment. They've actually have asked for an extension for the period of time from when this deployment was supposed to happen, which has been granted by the Department of Science and Innovation. And in the coming months, we hope to then be deploying other fuel cell systems in Northwest Province, in Limpopo, in KZN, and in other locations in Gauteng. In the rollout of this industry, not enough can be said about ensuring that you have the human talent to support the rollout. The thing that in South Africa we have to be very wary of is the rollout of technology, where we are being forced to import skills to support the technology. And so we need to be forward-looking, and again, in partnership with the Department of Science and Innovation and with Energy Water SETA, we put together a training program. And at Bambili, we are all about smart partnerships. So we are not a training company. So we teamed up with the University of Pretoria. The University of Pretoria, their engineering department is in the top 1% in the world rated. And they've been very forward-looking, very innovative. And in a very short period of time, with our international partners, we were able to train South African trainers in terms of the ability to train technicians in the maintenance and operations of fuel cell systems. And so to date, we've trained 38 candidates. And we really innovated during the training, because this obviously was happening during COVID. And the first cohort of students was in-person training at the University of Pretoria. The second cohort was done online. And so we at Bambili, after having had this experience with our partners, we are reimagining about how this type of training can be rolled out across the country. And so we are on a learning path with our partners about how to optimally do this, and to team up with TVET colleges, so that any unemployed TVET graduate anywhere in any corner of South Africa can have access to this training. And the combination of technology and the vast footprint of TVET colleges, University of Technologies, we believe that this is possible. So we are working to do the scale up. We are also expanding this concept and talking to other companies such as Sasol and Anglo American, who are very excited about the possibilities of rolling out this training further and for them to come on as partners. So I think it's a very exciting space to watch, and which is we believe, going to be very impactful over time. Lastly, again, thinking about scale, the trick, right, is to ensure that this industry takes hold. It's all about aggregation. It's aggregating supply, and it's aggregating demand of hydrogen. And we as Bambili, obviously, through our fuel cell systems, we would be leading on the side of the aggregation of demand of hydrogen. So this type of setting up of a hydrogen economy in South Africa at a practical and implementing level, it is about ensuring that you have almost a process in which you can spark that market adoption, and therefore the hydrogen valley and the hydrogen corridor are important parts of that. So, at a national level, what you have is, the South African hydrogen roadmap being developed by the South African government under the leadership of the Department of Science and Innovation. And if you look at this first box here on the left, the idea then was to put together a zero emission valley, as you saw from Dr. Chicheme's last slide that he spoke to. And in that exercise, the valley really is about putting together, being able to scope up a techno-economic analysis around the aggregation of hydrogen supply and demand in South Africa. So currently what we're finding is that there's a tremendous amount of excitement about the exporting hydrogen, because obviously there are large economies around the world who are interested in getting exported hydrogen from South Africa. But whilst that's very, very important, I believe that you cannot you cannot underestimate how important it is that the South African economy itself is a consumer of the green hydrogen, so that we can have a very stable and sustainable industry. And so the work that we've been doing jointly with Anglo-American, ANGI, SANEDI, and the Department of Science and Innovation is to aggregate that supply and demand. So we've had a study that has been going on for the past 6 months. We are hoping that we will be launching that particular report to the market around next month, around the 8th of October. So please watch that space. I think the report is going to be very insightful, and it would further add to the growing knowledge base that is going to help us develop this hydrogen economy. So beneath the valley, exactly in the same valley, and the valley, again, just to remind everybody, includes Limpopo, Gauteng, and in KZN, you have the hydrogen corridor. So Bambili has been working with Anglo-American and ANGI around developing this corridor to have fuel cell trucks and buses. And the idea is to, our take on it is really about commercial adoption. So this is not just a showcase about here's fuel cell trucks and buses in South African roads. This is about customers making a commercial decision to adopt fuel cell trucks and buses vis-a-vis diesel fuel trucks and buses. And we've made headway and we have worked very hard on this particular project. And in the coming months, there's I don't want to steal the thunder, but we will be making some announcements around the work we've been doing on the corridor. And again, around this corridor, it's all an aggregation game, right? We're trying to make sure we consolidate the demand around these vehicles, because that has a direct link to the demand we're going to have around the hydrogen. And so in order to get our corridor up and going, it's really building this very broad consortium of players working in concert together to aggregate that supply and demand. So in the bottom slide there on the left, what you see is the various players that we've been engaging with in terms of making sure we can get trucks and buses on the road. So we've been talking to global OEMs in the fuel cell industry who are already pioneering, because this idea is not new globally. There are valleys and there are corridors in the US, in Europe, in Asia, and South Africa. We are charting our own direction and learning lessons learned from those other markets. So we are also talking to logistics companies in South Africa and large corporates that are involved in having large fleets that they manage or that they rely on. And obviously, you know, companies that can supply the hydrogen so that we can have an infrastructure and get to a price point where we can be very competitive in our product offering vis-a-vis diesel trucks and buses. And that's all I had for you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mabusambata. That was indeed inspiring and very exciting to hear of the work that Bambili is doing and the successful projects that you've undertaken. There was a question about whether we really think that the hydrogen economy is kicking off. And after the past two presentations, I hope that there's a bit of belief that there is something happening, and it's not yet where we would like it to be, but we're very proud of the work that is being done. Next up, we have Dr. Raphael Karuahe, who is from the JSE and who will talk about setting up a metals exchange.
Good afternoon, Madam Program Director, and thank you for really according me the opportunity. Just checking, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thanks. I don't have a presentation really, but I'll talk to some of the notes that I have here in front of me. and maybe by way of introduction, not assuming that everybody in this meeting is from South Africa, by way of introducing the JSE, we are the biggest exchange operator in Africa. We provide a platform for capital raising in the primary equities market and bonds market. We're also trading secondary market as well as the derivatives market here in South Africa. We have partnered with MISTRA and all the other stakeholders for a number of years now to look at the research project really at the feasibility of establishing a PGM exchange in South Africa, and alongside the full value chain beneficiation that has been eloquently elaborated on by the experts in the field. And the outcome of this project was a publication of a book that was launched in 2018 or 19, titled The South African PGM Exchange, Policy for Financial Beneficiation. I think Joel alluded to that earlier in his introduction. That being said, as the JSE, we support beneficiation of PGMs. We think it's quite critical for our economy and for social upliftment, and especially when we talk of a resource where we are the primary provider, really. So it goes without saying. My task is really today looking at taking the next steps. Like any new product that we have been launching on the exchange, the success of establishing a PGM exchange is dependent on a number of factors, the most crucial of which, in my opinion, really, is securing a good balance between the market participants who are keen to actually participate and take positions on the PGM platform. It was agreed earlier then on, as we were consulting with our stakeholders, that the JSE would then drive the engagements with potential market participants to gauge the appetite in the market. And really in our world, the market participants I'm referring to would typically be the mining houses, who are the primary producers of the commodity, the off-takers, who would then use the exchange to source the necessary material that they need. Banks, of course, would be key here because they could act as financiers as well as deal makers in that space. We also need speculators. They are very crucial for market making and for providing liquidity, especially in the initial stages when you start something new and there are no deals going through on the exchange. You need that speculator to be on both sides and create a momentum for participation, really. So those are very crucial for launching new products on exchanges, born out of experience. This process is still ongoing, the one of engaging stakeholders. We have done a couple, we still have got some to go. And we are looking forward to really presenting some of the outcomes to the relevant stakeholders we have been engaging with. But I think as we went through these engagements, or still in the process of going through this engagement, we have also identified a number of what I would call opportunities and challenges that we observed during the consultative process. And I think if I may just share a couple. On the competitive advantage side, definitely, I think we already alluded to that primary production of platinum, palladium, and all the other PGMs is predominantly in South Africa, or combined with Zimbabwe. Definitely, we are talking of Southern Africa. Number one. Number two, the JSE has the technology and experience to operate a PGM exchange on a turnkey basis. So that is not really it's a no-brainer when it comes to that. the opportunity for physically settled PGM contract was singled out as providing an edge over similar products currently existing globally. So in other words, we are not the only exchange that may provide PGMs on our platforms. But what we also found out is that most of the activities on the international platforms is really just cash settled contracts that are just there for price discovery, really. But here we say, in an event where you combine that with physical delivery, in other words, when your instrument expires, your financial instrument expires that you were trading on the exchange, you have the option to actually receive the physical ounce of platinum or palladium at the end of the day. So that would actually give us an edge, a competitive edge, or at least a unique platform and a value add that is probably going to be attractive. Opportunities for expansion into the downstream value-added products. I think all the previous contributors have alluded to what's going on in that space, the electric vehicles and fuel cells and so on, and really to fuel the green economy. And that's the way to go. So those are really some of the key competitive edges and positives that we see if we were to proceed, which we want to do in this space. The challenges are as follows, and of course they need to be managed. Recycled PGMs are on the rise in the secondary market. In other words, you find that of the products that has been in circulation already, we see more and more of the additional needs being actually met by secondary products from scrap metals that are being recycled and then brought back into the secondary market. Another issue is that the OTC PGM market, in other words, where people do not trade on the exchange, but it's more using some benchmark prices to trade over the counter. That market is much, much bigger than the derivatives market that we want to launch, with reference data being the accepted benchmarks or industry benchmarks globally. So even if we are to establish a local exchange, we are up against an over-the-counter market that is way bigger and that is well established. So those are the kind of things that we need to look at. The other consideration is that producers who are, at least, which is the competitive advantage we have in South Africa, that we are the primary producer of the product, but many of the mining majors, for example, may not be using a derivatives market to hedge their prices, based on the historical structures that they have in place and long-term commitments with their suppliers and so on, or their off-takers, such that if the crucial participant like the producers are not seeing value or may not really participate as much as we wanted, that is something that we need to guard and to observe and see how we are going to manage that kind of risk. And of course, this is where institutions like your speculators or your intermediaries, brokers, would be very, very necessary to make sure that you provide the necessary liquidity on your market. The other factor that was also considered and observed as we were talking to these many participants is the fact that we are now currently in a bullish commodity super cycle. And typically that is not the ideal state to be in to need a hedge. Normally, typically hedges on these exchanges are very much required when the prices are very, very low, and companies are struggling, to run profitably. It is then at such instances where exchanges would be very crucial. We just started a super cycle in commodities, which could last typically for a couple of years. So again, it's something that we need to consider, because in an environment where everybody's smiling all the way to the bank, who wants to hedge? So those are some of the considerations that we need to factor in. China is upcoming as a reference price or a reference region for PGMs as well, because of the fact that, of course, China may be one of the largest absorbers of the commodity. So over time, they may become the benchmark, center for PGM prices in general. Something to also look at and take watch and manage how we're going to want to establish an exchange in the face of all that. And of course, the size of the market and volumes during the initial stages are very crucial. I mean, in the exchanges or that we are used to, we launch new products every now and then, and it's not that everything succeeds at once. And unless you have got most of the things that I have alluded to in place and perfectly in place, that you may actually guarantee a very successful launch. And the launch is not the issue, but the upkeep and the running of the exchange going forward, that you may not ending up suspending what you have started. Yeah, so those are some of the realistic considerations that I wanted to share, but of course it's work in progress. We are going to report back to our partners and then see how we take this forward given the environment that I just alluded to. The other thing that I also wanted to share with you is the carbon market. You would know that the government, South African government, just about 2019 passed the Carbon Credit Act, Carbon Market Act or Carbon Credit Act, which then would be which is meant to actually influence behavior of the emitters of greenhouse gases. Now this comes really at the right time when we are busy looking at value addition and beneficiation of the PGM environment, and where we are actually, because of the beneficiation, we are actually forcing migration from fossil fuel trucks and cars and so on over to electric cars, while we are using our own domestic inputs in this. So we see that this carbon market is something that came in very handy. When you establish a project, a green project like this, similar to what we also saw from Bambili and Anglo Platinum and some of the other mining houses, is that you could then actually register your green project through the Department of Mining, Mineral Resources and Energy, and then it gets credited. Of course, it gets vetted and validated that it's indeed a green project. It's assigned a value, and as a result of that, you could actually then use what they issue you as offset credits to actually sell these credits into the market and raise capital for you to actually go and do more of the good work that you are doing in the green environment. And the JSE is also now looking at trading what we call carbon credit futures on the back of the carbon credit market, the act that has been promulgated. And based on these carbon offsets, we could then float this on the market for the project issuers. They raise capital and they get an income. But then for the emitters of the greenhouse gases, they would use these carbon credits to then offset their carbon tax liability. So in other words, either way, they have to pay the carbon tax, but if they can get these credits cheaper in the market, in the open market, they can then offset those against the tax liability. So it's a win-win for the market. It's driven by law, and I think it's also just something that arrived right at the time when we are looking at what can we do with the PGM beneficiation. And you can see that this value addition is really filling a void and driving some of these other new initiatives that we are talking about. In conclusion, I wanted to also touch on the striking a balance between a free market and the PGM being a strategic asset. In exploring the viability of establishing a PGM exchange, we also need to strike a balance between a conducive regulatory environment or framework for the creation of the local exchange, and at the same time looking at a free market environment that would attract capital investments by the main international investors and the mining majors and so on. So it's crucial that we also do not over-regulate the environment such that you deter those free market participants who would want to come on board. But it's also good that to stimulate the environment and to bring on board previously disadvantaged and all that, some form of regulation is necessary, but a very delicate balance needs to be struck for us to see this going through. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Indeed, you've given us food for thought. We have about 15 minutes for a discussion session. There are a few questions that were posed in the Q&A and that have been answered, but I'd like some of them to just be fielded verbally. So we'll allow a few people to come on and pose their questions to the speakers. If we could allow, Pabi, let me just see. If we could allow Padilihotla to just, Mr. Padilihotla to just come through to ask his question on how that we foresee basically the hydrogen, our role in the hydrogen economy, and whether it is something that will become something like the blue economy, which was run by Operation Pakisa. Could you please allow, if he's still online?
Yeah, you would like me to talk?
Yes, we're allowing you to just
okay,
pose your
that's
question.
fine. I have 4 questions. I mean, I'm making these questions, I'm posing these questions because I'm actually excited by what the prospects are. But we have seen prospects from Operation Pakisa on the blue economy. And I'm not sure what has happened to that. I would be inspired by, what does this mean? Is it like oil in the Middle East, where that desert was turned around? If it is, why are we waiting and taking so long? I mean, I'm trying to find out why that is the case. I mean, why is our education system not saying we actually are going through this, we'll invest in free university education to deal with this, rather than nibble at the margins on something that is a real serious game changer? Why has it taken us from 2002 to now to get to this point? I mean, I was in government at the time when we talked about Pebble and this particular innovation. Who should lead in this process, especially in the context of where we are collapsing at the moment? The last point that I wanted to make really is, yes, about whether this is it real or is it just a dream? Oh yes, why are we trying to demobilize coal when in the presentation the emissions can actually be captured and not exit and be pollutants, but converted into something useful? So why are we demobilizing coal? So the question is, who is at the center of the decisions around this innovation? Because then we can be in a super cycle of super energy in South Africa, both coal, both nuclear, and then of course, this very important energy. Those are my questions.
Thank you for those. Dr. Chiteme, would you like to tackle those?
Most certainly, and thank you, Mr. Lekosha, for raising those very critical questions. I'm glad you were in the system for quite a long time, and yes, we do get frustrated sometimes at the speed in which we roll out some of these programs that, at the face of it, appear to be very. It's almost like a no-brainer that we are going to gain, but we also live we are currently in a system where there are financial constraints and there are competing needs. But I think there is movement in the direction that we think will leverage on these opportunities. And the development of the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, as much as it has taken us close to 18 months or close to 12 months, basically this is where we are. I think it has been a process that has given us hope in the ability for us to come together as government, as well as private sector, because private sector has been waiting to say, look, we can really come on board as long as there is policy certainty. And we are getting to that point where there is policy certainty, or at least an overarching roadmap that can leverage on the developments that have been supported by government through the Hydrogen South Africa program to move us forward. We may not move at the speed that we want to. You have also raised, I think, issues of, is it real? I think this hydrogen economy has gone through some cycles. The difference between what we are currently experiencing is that there is international investments and global efforts that are actually pulling in the same direction, given the opportunity to decarbonize, but also to reconstruct economies following the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of positioning our education system, yes, there's been some efforts. Can we do more? Yes, there's more that needs to be done. And we hope that the Hydrogen Society Roadmap will then be the rallying document to bring stakeholders together to pull us forward or to move us forward. I think with respect to the point that you have raised around the coal power stations, yes, we developed this roadmap around the coal CO2 to X program in December last year. That's when it was approved by our EXCO. We believe that this program or projects will actually provide a domestic platform for us to scale up the use of hydrogen and then position ourselves for the global export. But I think there's a lot that we can talk about, and we'll be happy to engage even beyond this roundtable to also get your ideas on how we can actually facilitate some of these initiatives going forward. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Dr. Chitame. I'm just trying to see if there are any more questions. Would Martin Creamer like to come on and just pose his question?
Martin Creamer from Mining Weekly. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
One of the things that was raised recently was the need for a collective collaboration. We see other countries also moving towards hydrogen economy, other countries in Africa. And I think for South Africa to really succeed, some champion needs to emerge to take the lead here. And I was wondering whether Mapungubwe itself couldn't actually take the lead to coordinate representatives that would work collectively in the national interests and hopefully ahead of even the Glasgow 26 to get our direction really focused and to be able to present this to the world. So my question is, would Mapungubwe be prepared to either champion this or to make sure that they become the catalyst where someone comes forward to champion this really well? Because I think we've got a good advantage at the moment, but if we don't move fast, we might find ourselves falling behind. So that is my question. Can we find a champion, please?
I'd like to ask Joel, our ED, to perhaps just tackle that.
Okay, thanks. Very briefly, Zama, we see ourselves as MISTRA more as a facilitator of interaction amongst the various partners in the hydrogen economy, rather than a champion or an activist advocate. We do research, we facilitate interaction, and our understanding, and Dr. Chiteme may help in this regard, is that the Department of Science and Innovation is that champion. It initiated all these processes, though they've taken time. And as Dr. Chiteme was saying, very soon they will be presenting their proposals to cabinet, and policy or further policy should derive from that. For both, in my view, or rather for the Department of Science and Innovation, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, to work together to ensure that this strategy is implemented. And if you were to ask me for a preference, with DSI remaining as the champion. Thanks.
Thank you. We're running out of time, so could the panelists please just give us the closing remarks, just 2 minutes each. What is the final take-home message that you have? Starting with, let me start with Raphael.
He's muted.
You muted, Raf.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah, just wanted to thank the MISTRA and the excellent organization of this event. I think from the questions coming out of these participants is that we are hungry for more. We have done a lot of planning for too long. It's a matter of when can we put all these good efforts into practical actions and implementation. And I think, as participants, we understand that we are dealing with a divergent group of stakeholders with too many interests that are conflicting at times. But I think kudos to MISTRA for really driving some of this, and we hope going forward the road ahead is shorter than where we come from. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zanele.
My closing remark that I'd like to make is that I think that we shouldn't underestimate what it takes to build the hydrogen economy, to build the fuel cell industry in South Africa, and that there is tremendous goodwill on the table from both the private sector and government to work together to meet these big challenges we have, because we are in global competition with other countries and other players in this space internationally. And I'm very optimistic and very excited about the prospects of what is possible to reimagine our economy and for us to play a central role in global supply chains around the fuel cell industry specifically. And we as Bambili look forward to participating and both at the hydrogen economy level and also championing the development of the fuel cell industry. And lastly, I'd like to thank MISTRA for inviting Bambili to participate today. And I look forward to further engagements. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Dr. Chiteme.
Thank you, Program Director. I think one of the things, having been involved in the development of the roadmap from the beginning until the point where we are now, what the process has demonstrated is across the public sector, if we pull together, we can actually move forward in a very integrated and coordinated way, not only as government, but together with the private sector. So in some cases, I think the responsibility, or in the majority of cases, the responsibility is on us as government to lead the process so that private sector can actually have the confidence to actually make the necessary investments. But more importantly, I think I would like to say, as a country, South Africa, we don't have a choice to embrace the hydrogen economy. Otherwise, that's the only opportunity that we have to sustain our PGM industry. And the fact that we can actually link the production of green hydrogen to our existing fossil fuel industry in a way that will actually make that industry sustainable is a plus for the country. And I think it's time for us to really rally behind the Hydrogen Society roadmap and actually implement projects at large scale that would actually allow us to derive the economic benefits from that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but if you'd like to have further engagements, please contact MISTRA. And I see in the chat, Tsebiso from the DTI has also offered to continue with some of these conversations, which have been very useful and fruitful. Would like to thank everyone, our esteemed guests, for attending this round table this afternoon. We trust that you've gained something from the conversations that have been had. We'd like to thank our partners for this roundtable, Creamer Media. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for availing yourselves for this afternoon and giving us such insightful comments. And we'd like to thank the ETT, MISTRA's ETT, which is the events task team, for working with Creamer Media and making sure that we have this event and it's as successful as it has been. If there's anyone that I've left out, please forgive me. But thank you so much for attending this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Zama. I, for one, have certainly learned a lot and I'm quite inspired. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank each of our panelists for joining us today, and thank you to our attendees for taking the time to join this webinar. If you would like more information about MISTRA, please visit their website at mistra.org.za. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course. If you have any additional questions, please do be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. I wish you all well, stay safe and well. Thank you and goodbye.